The film opens in a classroom, where teacher Marty notices his students getting distracted. They're constantly looking outside whenever fire trucks and police cars pass by. The children report that California has been hit by another earthquake, submerging a large part of the city. Marty tries to check the news, but the internet isn't working. Shortly after, Marty needs to contact all his students' parents. However, the lack of internet access prevents this from happening and chaos reigns. Marty has his students' files, but that's not enough, and now, without internet, everyone feels as if the world is coming to an end. While leaving school, Marty gets stuck in traffic because the lights are out. On the way, he sees a sign above a bank with a picture of an accountant, Chuck, and the words, "Thank you, Chuck, for 39 wonderful years." Soon, news begins coming in from around the world that the ocean is slowly swallowing up many areas. Additionally, several volcanoes are erupting. Forest fires are spreading. A tsunami is also approaching. People in China are already fighting. Meanwhile, we see Marty's ex-wife, who works as a nurse at a hospital. In the past few weeks, several staff members have taken their own lives. Watching her colleagues die daily has been taking a toll on her mental state. She takes a break in the restroom, and the same news comes on the radio, with Chuck now saying, "Thank you everyone for 39 wonderful years." Then a colleague asks Marty's wife, "Is marriage easier or divorce easier?" She replies, "Marriage happens in an hour, but divorce takes months." Later that night, she calls Marty and says, "I've been thinking about you all day." She asks if couples are getting married again after separation because, in difficult times, people want to stay together. Then she tells him about some of her coworkers who quit their jobs so they could be with their families. Marty explains, "I too have very few students left." And then he starts talking about the cosmic calendar and humanity. Then his wife mentions the Chuck ad she saw, and Marty admits he saw it too. Both wonder who is putting up this ad about the end of the world. Neither of them knows who Chuck is. After the call ends, Marty tries to watch TV, but the signal soon goes out, just like the internet. After a few seconds of a black screen, Chuck's face appears and a man behind him announces, "Thank you for 39 wonderful years, Chuck." Then the signal goes out again. The next morning, Marty notices that his neighbor isn't using her car. The neighbor explains that she has to walk 3 miles to and from work because a sinkhole has formed on the road. A massive hole that has cut the city in half and swallowed many vehicles, even buildings. There's heavy traffic on the remaining roads, so it might be noon before Marty gets to school. Then they discuss the current situation. Only 10% of California remains. One part is burning, another is flooded. In short, many cities have been destroyed. Diseases are spreading, killing people. Animals and birds are dying, and their numbers have dwindled. Meanwhile, Marty sees his neighbor returning home because she couldn't go to work. The sinkhole has swallowed her vehicle and even the entire building where she used to work. Marty talks to a friend of his wife's who used to work at a bank and asks her about the Chuck sign, but she doesn't know what it means. People everywhere look sad, and Marty's neighbor says everyone is going through shock. Initially, there were protests, demonstrations, and fights, but when they didn't stop, people accepted it. They've become accustomed to these things and are just waiting for the world to end. During the conversation, an airplane writes, "Thanks, Chuck," in the sky. While on her way to work, Marty's wife notices dozens of graffiti with Chuck's name painted on every wall. She walks to the hospital and finds no staff or patients there. But all the monitors are still on and showing the exact same heart rate as if they were all connected to one person. The beds are empty, but the monitors seem to be tracking just one person's heartbeat. After a while, Marty is worried because the TV still doesn't have a signal. When he tries to call his wife, he finds that the phone lines are also down. He sets out to find her. As he continues through town, he sees many abandoned cars and more posters of Chuck. An old man is resting on a bench. Marty asks him if he knows who Chuck is, but he has no idea. He's asked people, but no one knows. Now, since the old man is also headed in the same direction, they walk together for a while. On the way, they talk about life and how much time a person really has. Then the old man's legs start to ache, so he sits down on a bench to rest. He watches the sunset while Marty continues on alone. Finally, Marty reaches his wife's neighborhood. There, he meets a little girl who recognizes his wife's name and says she's always been very nice to the neighborhood children. The girl is skating because she wants to have a good time before the world ends. Suddenly, the power goes out in the entire neighborhood. Marty tells her to go home to be safe. At that very moment, Chuck's ads start appearing in every house's windows, making the entire neighborhood appear haunted. A panicked Marty runs and finally finds his wife. They embrace and reunite. He asks about the ad, but she has no idea how it appeared. Meanwhile, 39-year-old Chuck has fallen ill. Very weak and ill, he has a heart monitor attached to him which shows the same heart rate as at the hospital. His wife and son sit beside him, crying because they know he doesn't have much time left. Meanwhile, Marty and his wife go to the back of the house and look at the sky. Now that the power has gone out, the stars appear brighter and clearer than before. They hold hands and look at different stars. Then suddenly, a star vanishes and then one by one, all the stars begin to disappear from the sky. At this moment, Chuck's wife and son say goodbye to him and thank him for his 39 wonderful years. Marty tries to tell his wife that he loves her, but at that very moment, everything goes black. The world is plunged into darkness as if everything has ended. The end of the world. Now the timeline jumps back a few years. Before the end of the world, a young musician works in a record store. But she loves music so much that she often sets up her drum set on a crowded street corner and plays for people. Sometimes people even give her tips, but this happens very rarely. Meanwhile, a young writer is going home, angry because her friend has just broken up with her with just one message. But then she gathers herself and thinks, my life isn't over yet, there's so much more to do. Just as I was a dancer before, now that I'm a writer, I'll have better plans in the future. Chuck happens to be in the same city heading to a banking conference. He's a successful accountant at a major bank. He's loyal to his wife, loves her, and is proud of his son who's a good student. But the truth is, Chuck isn't happy with his life because his work is boring and he hates other accountants. When the musician sees Chuck walking down the street in such a distressed state, she starts playing a loud tune to cheer him up. Surprisingly, Chuck stops in front of her and after a little hesitation starts dancing. Soon, a crowd gathers, including the writer. She needed something positive in her life. She also starts dancing. Chuck grabs her and brings her forward, and together they dance happily to the musician's tune. After a while, Chuck feels a headache, but he thinks it's because of his glasses, takes them off and starts dancing again. The crowd enjoys it so much that they put a lot of notes in the musician's hat. After this, the three of them sit in a cafe and the musician shares the money between them. Chuck looks a little sick, but he assures her that he's absolutely fine. The musician asks him what compelled him to dance. Chuck says he doesn't know, but memories of his old band keep coming to his mind. He used to be a dancer. The musician bids them goodbye as she leaves and hugs them both. Afterward, Chuck and the writer go for a walk together. The writer reveals her broken relationship. Chuck assures her that she'll be fine. After they part ways, Chuck looks around and notices a child skating. Even that empty corner makes him wonder why he stopped to dance. Later, his illness will worsen to the point where he can't sit or walk. Then he remembers that dance and thinks that perhaps this was the reason God created the world. Humans have a good time in the beginning where they live life to the fullest. But one day that life comes to an end. An end where a person is helpless and unable to do anything. When Chuck was 7 years old, he lived with his grandparents because his parents were killed in a car accident. The saddest part was that his mother was also pregnant at the time. For a long time, the atmosphere in the house remains filled with sadness. His grandfather would try to drown his grief by drinking and immersing himself in accounting to keep himself busy. His grandmother had also given up all work, cooking nothing. When Chuck turned 10, the atmosphere at home improved a bit, but his grandfather's drinking habit persisted. However, his grandmother resumed cooking and dancing to music. She often made Chuck dance along, and that's why Chuck has such impressive dance moves. They also watched a lot of movies together, especially those with dancing scenes. His grandparents' house soon became his de facto home. Except for one place he wasn't allowed to go, the cupola on the roof. His grandfather and grandmother said the floor was weak and there was nothing up there, so he was forbidden to go there. Chuck tried to sneak up to that door but couldn't open the lock. The day before Chuck's 11th birthday, his grandfather and Chuck were watching a documentary on the cosmic calendar. Grandpa was drunk, so Chuck brought up the cupola. Grandpa said that up there a person can see as much as they want to. Strange things are often seen there and that's why it's locked. He then explained that the house is very old and has been rebuilt many times, but the cupola has been there since the beginning. In all his time in the house, he'd only stepped inside the cupola a few times, and each time he'd seen the ghosts of people who weren't dead, but were alive, appearing before their deaths. He said that waiting for death is always the hardest part. When Grandma came home, she sent Grandpa to get his belongings so that fresh air could sober him up. She told Chuck not to believe Grandpa's words. He was only saying such things under the influence of alcohol. Later, Chuck asked a neighbor about the dead people and Grandpa's relationships with them, believing that all the ghosts were appearing to Grandpa because of his mistakes and embarrassments. Chuck's favorite subject in school was English. That's why his English teacher liked him so much. One day after class, Chuck asked her about a poem that included the line, "I am large. I contain multitudes." Meaning, I am very large inside and I contain many things inside. The teacher then explained that a person is actually a composite of everything they've met and experienced in their lives. These could be humans and human emotions like happiness, sorrow, goodness, and evil. Every person has a whole world in their mind and they decide what to fill it with. Love, hate, good thoughts, or bad thoughts, the end of something or never thinking about its end, tension or always being in a good mood all depend on their thinking. But yes, all these things are connected to a person's life. They also end with death. In other words, what a person thinks is their world, and this mental world ends with death. Then we learn that the world that was initially described as ending was actually the world in Chuck's mind, which ended with his death. A few months later, Grandma dies. She was shopping and suddenly collapsed. After the funeral, the house becomes gloomy again and Grandpa's alcoholism worsens. Chuck goes to the store and asks the cashier what happened. The girl explains that everything happened very quickly. Grandma simply collapsed and died before anyone knew it. One night, Grandpa fell asleep at his desk and Chuck found his set of keys. He stealthily manages to open the cupola. But just as he's about to step inside, his grandfather yells and pulls him away. He then goes to the door himself to close it, but suddenly something inside frightens him. After closing the door, he sees Chuck crying. His grandfather embraces him and apologizes, but doesn't explain what he saw, but the distress is clearly visible on his face. Later, Chuck learns that the school has a dance club. He joins in memory of his grandmother. The teacher is pleased that another boy has joined as there were more girls. Each day, training takes place with different music. Chuck is paired with a senior dancer whom he develops a liking for, and tries to impress her with the dance moves he learned from his grandmother. Gradually, he begins teaching others and then the senior dancer agrees to dance with him at the school dance event. The teacher gives him new shoes to make it easier for him. He then puts on the shoes and enjoys dancing. Chuck thinks this could be his career. But his grandfather constantly teaches him math to ensure a brighter future, as art doesn't pay. He then explains that math is present everywhere in the world. We can't turn away from it. Even in music. Here, notes and tempos are counted, indicating the notes, melodies, and songs we've sung. In my accounting files, even people are numbered, indicating how many people there are. Math is an art that doesn't lie. On the night of the event, Chuck tells the dancer that he can't dance. He has a leg pain. He'd actually made up this excuse after hearing what his grandfather told him. But the teacher who overhears this says, "If you don't want to dance, don't dance. At least don't lie to your friend even though you like her." Chuck goes outside to look at the stars, contemplates, and then returns and invites the dancer to dance. Their performance is excellent. Everyone praises it, which makes Chuck think, something can be beneficial for us. Like math, we should choose what brings us joy and peace in life. For example, he chose to dance with the dancer and he felt bad about lying. But before his death, when he was well, he told his wife that when something is predetermined, a person ends up doing things they don't want to. 5 years later, Grandpa dies of a heart attack at home. At that time, Chuck was a little older and enjoying himself with his dance band. A man tells Chuck that his grandfather had already paid for his funeral expenses. This makes Chuck suspect that perhaps he had seen his own death in the cupola. Chuck inherits the house and decides to live there. Time passes and he gets married. Later, Chuck finds Grandpa's belongings, including the cupola keys. Chuck finally opens the cupola. Inside, the floor is perfect and the room is empty. His grandparents had said the room was in a bad state. One could only see outside and there was nothing special. Thinking this, he was about to leave in sadness when Chuck suddenly imagines a future in the future. He sees his own old age as he lies in bed, counting down his last breaths. Now he realizes that human deaths are visible here. Grandpa had told him a little about the cupola. Grandpa had also witnessed the deaths of his neighbors, Grandma's death and then his own, and that's why he said that waiting for death is the hardest thing. Especially when a person knows something bad is about to happen, the thought itself can lead to depression. Now, as he recovers from this thought, Chuck resolves to live his life to the fullest and not sink into depression like Grandpa. He won't drink alcohol out of stress like him. Although he too has seen his death, he resolves to live his life to the fullest and repeats the poem's line, "I am large and I contain multitudes." It means that it is now up to him to decide what he will fill his mind with in his life. He then lived his life happily even though his life was filled with countless tensions. He was confident that he had lived such a good life that people would be impressed by him and thank him for his wonderful 39 years. This is what went through his mind as we saw in the beginning, because he believed that he had become a perfect example for everyone to live. No matter how troubled we are, we should always think positive and live life happily. And with this, the story of this movie ends here. Subscribe to Movo Reels, where every movie tells its story again.